Hey guys, here we are in the materials storage shed at the back of the old Japanese farmhouse. We're going to haul out this big bin. We had a water tank to collect rainwater. Some of you might remember we made a tank stand for it about eight years ago. The weather's killed it, killed the tank and the stand, so we need a new one. So we didn't want to spend any money. We did the maths, it worked out it wasn't worth spending any money, so we decided to try and do it with materials that we have. So this was originally used to store rice. Not by us, by the old man who owned the place before us. So we weren't quite sure. It was made to store rice and to keep bugs out, but we weren't quite sure how waterproof it might be. So decided to put it to the test. We've had a lot of rain recently, as you know, because it's been the rainy season. So set it up where the old water tank used to be and let it fill up with water to see how it would go. And it did leak a little bit around the bottom, just a little bit. And around that port there at the front you can see, because that wasn't designed to be waterproof either. But overall, surprisingly, it held the water pretty well. So, off to the workshop. As with a lot of these projects, we get the unskilled labour onto it. The mission is to make a water tank that's going to hold rainwater that we can use in the garden without spending any money. We worked out the 500 litre tank that we had before saved us about 70 yen. So to replace it, to buy another one, that one we got free, and to buy another one was going to be about 15,000 yen, so this wouldn't be worth doing. So if we can make it with this and materials we have lying around the house, it will be worthwhile. So you can see that little door there was to let rice out, so they'd fill it from the top and then just turn that little door around and let the rice out, so don't need that. We need a hole around here to put a tap in. There was a few doubts going on as this job was happening. It was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. There was a few doubts. But we thought we'd give it a go. And again, the old man left so many materials, and the other things that we're using are things that were left over from other jobs. So just giving the inside a bit of a clean out, get rid of the bits of iron filings and things, or galvanized iron filings. That old vacuum cleaner was here when we moved into. Geez, that's a handy thing to have an outside vacuum cleaner that you can use to clean anything. So yeah, inside's not bad, a bit dusty. That's alright. Wanted it a little bit clean in there because wanted to silicon up the inside a little bit around the bottom. Just around the bottom was where it leaked a bit, so that tap was here too. Those of you who saw the original videos made at the old Japanese farmhouse when we first took over the place would have seen all the bits and pieces we collected. It's just tons. We took 10 tons of stuff away, but just tons of useful stuff that we've used over the time that we've been here. So it's a messy job. Trying to silicon around the bottom corner all the way around. Can't reach the other side of the tank, unfortunately, but better than nothing, to do as much of it as we could. And then just sort of added a little tap to this little door thing, and then just siliconed it, because it was a pretty tight fit, the cap that goes over that. So put silicone around it, just tapped it on. That should keep it on. And then just that little tap at the front. So yeah, monsoon season, 5 weeks of rain every day. Sort of ironic, isn't it, to be putting together a water tank to catch rainwater when we've got more water than we need. But this 5 weeks it rains and rains all the time, but the rest of the year sometimes it doesn't rain for a few weeks at a time, and that's when the rainwater tank's useful. for watering the garden or watering plants. And again, it doesn't sort of save us a lot of money, but it's a good feeling, instead of using tap water that we're paying for and that has to be processed, just to use rainwater that just comes for free. If we can make this thing with materials that we get for free, that paint is left over from the roof job. Some of you might remember there was a roof job done at the front of the house that had to be done, and that silver paint was left over from that. Actually, it was a roof at the back of the house, wasn't it? On the old shed at the back. So free paint, leftover paint. Actually gave it a couple of coats. This job didn't actually happen at this speed, surprisingly. And it was spread out. It was an hour or so now and again over a couple of weeks, as with lots of these jobs that we do. The rain just doesn't stop this time of year. It just does not stop. So this is from inside the material shed. Just doesn't stop, which is good to be doing inside jobs like that. It's a bit of fun. To be in the workshop. So now we need to make the stand. So there's a couple of posts left over from the old stand. The other two corners rotted away really badly from being in the sun and the rain for 8 years. But 2 of the legs were still pretty good. So sort of ferreting around. Slowly the materials in the material shed, you can see, is getting smaller. That was really full 8 years ago. But all the projects that we've done, all the materials that we've used, which is good, isn't it? So collecting together a few materials there into the machinery room. We're lucky to have a couple of workshops. That one that you saw first with the tank in it is sort of where we do most of the jobs, but this is where the heavier tools are. The lawnmower and the power saw and the drop saw and the grinder, all the noisy big tools. So just cutting up some wood. So here's the thing for you. The diameter of the round water tank was about 73 centimetres, but we wanted to make a stand that sat under the tank, that didn't overlap. So the idea was that the tank would protect the top of the stand, because the last stand rotted pretty badly, pretty quickly, even though it was painted really well. So we have to work out what are the sides of a square going to be. They're going to sit inside a circle with a 73 centimetre diameter. There's some maths for you. So the unskilled labourer is also an unskilled mathematician. But worked out that 50 centimetres, if the sides of the stand were 50 centimetres, it should sit within the diameter of the tank. When we put the tank on top of it, the tank should totally cover the legs. So 50 centimetres by 50 centimetres, so a little bit narrow. Would have preferred it to be the legs to be further apart to give it more stability, but as a compromise, because wanted the tank to cover the top of the stand, so the tank would be protecting the stand. So then lots of bracing was required, bracing at the top, bracing at the bottom. So again, all these materials are left over from other jobs or things that were left there from the old man. So some huge bolts. He had so many bolts and nuts, and we've got big boxes of bolts and nuts of different sizes, so we used some of those. And then we had hex bolts that he'd left there as well. So more like a screw, not a bolt, a screw, a hex screw with a hexagonal head and a screw, and then just some big screws that we had. So it was sort of bits and pieces, but lots of them, and braced top and bottom on all 4 sides, because a lot of lateral force, and we get we get earthquakes and we get typhoons. Typhoons are pretty windy. I'm not sure what the volume of this thing will be, but the one we had before was 500 litres, which is 500 kilo about, isn't it? This one's not so big. It might be 200 or 300, something like that, which is still pretty heavy, isn't it? Particularly when a wind's blowing sideways. So I wanted it well braced. It's all pretty rough. All this wood is all second hand, all the timber's second hand, so nothing's really square. Everything's a bit warped and a bit bent and a bit twisted, and the lengths of the legs were a bit different from each other. But where it's going to sit isn't flat either. So the thinking was make it roughly, the legs roughly the same height, and then we'll adjust it at the end. Paint it up with some recycled paint. So yeah, when you're making things with recycled pieces and bits and pieces of leftover things, you have to sort of compromise quite a bit. Can't have too high expectations of the result. Main result obviously is we want it to last as long as possible and don't want it to fall over. They're the two biggest requirements of this job. See the wind, you can see the wind and the rain outside. It's just amazing. It just does not stop. 4 or 5 weeks, just does not stop raining. And then it did, having said that, and then it did for an afternoon. So right, okay, let's have a go at this. So I moved it out, and then a lot of faffing around there. Bricks and tiles. So bricks first, and then to level it up, just thin tiles. And then actually a bit of bicycle rubber tube, bicycle tyre tube, just to stop the rattly bits, because if you have bricks and tiles, they're a bit rattly. So a bit of rubber over the top of that to make everything sit nicely without wobbling or rattling. So that was the base with the legs, and then at the top, same sort of setup really. Trying to make it really sort of level. Actually, the end result was a slight lean towards the house, which was sort of what we'd prefer. Because to the right there is the neighbour's house, so we don't want to go that way. So one last paint just on the final thing. So by now it's had 3 coats, that should be enough. It's out in the weather though, so we want to sort of protect it as much as we can, give it as long a life as we can. So put a bit of silicone around the bottom there, because it did leak a little bit when we filled it up for that test. So silicone around the inside, or half around the inside, and then all the way around the outside. And then made this sort of a filter from a, what do you call that, strainer, colander strainer, and some fly screen. It's going to sit in the top, just to strain out any lumpy bits that come down the water pipe. There's a scene, isn't it? A bit of polystyrene it was sitting on. Silicone across the bottom as well. Didn't trust that joint either, but as it turns out, it didn't leak. And then actually put a bead of silicone all the way around, underneath, around the circumference of it. The idea is that if the water runs down the rain tank, so let's say the rain falls against the side of the tank and then runs down, don't want it to run underneath and get on the wood, so just made a bit of a lip of silicone around the bottom to make it drop off without going underneath on the legs. I mean, they're still going to get wet and they're still going to be in the sun, they're still going to deteriorate over time, but just doing what we can to reduce that as much as possible. So throwing a hose in the top, just want to put some water in there to give it some weight, because it is a little windy, and it's going to start raining soon, that'll be fine, but just in the meantime, just want a bit of weight in the bottom. So threw the hose in the top, and look in through there, look at that, isn't that cool? Here it is. Just wanted to put a few inches in just to see if it was going to leak and give it weight so it didn't blow away. And it just fitted in that circumference too. That 50 centimeters was just right for the circumference of the tank. So there's the final setup at the top there, all ready for the rain that's going to start again tomorrow. And then don't want it overflowing. The other one used to overflow when it was full, and then the water would run down the tank onto the stand. So this time we've got this setup going on. So the tap's always open, tap's always on, and the hose goes up there and then down again, which means if it gets to that point at the top of the hose there, it'll automatically run out the hose. So it won't get any deeper than where that hook is, will it? So when you take the hose off the hook, of course, the water comes out. So usually we use a watering can. If we want to get 10 litres of water or 20 litres of water, put on some plants, usually just fill it up with a watering can. So there's been a couple of people out there screaming for unskilled labourer jobs, so this is about the most interesting one we've had for a while. Most of the others are just repairs and maintenance and really not interesting. You know, they happen all the time in the old house. So projects like this, you know, we don't do a lot of these. It's mostly repairs and maintenance in the old house, but this was something to keep us busy, and it'll start raining again soon. Off we go. But when the rain stops, we'll have some spare water, won't we? Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.